I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli army retaliates against a bombing on the Gaza border. Israel has temporarily decided to freeze the deportation of African asylum seekers. And if you're looking for a reason to smile, come to Israel because it's just been ranked one of the happiest countries in the world. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. The Israeli army got an early wake-up call this morning when a bomb exploded on the Gaza border. No IDF soldiers are reported to have been injured in the blast, and at this time, no terror organization has claimed responsibility for the attack. But as per policy, Israel holds Hamas responsible for all aggression in the Strip and has counterattacked Hamas targets. Israeli tanks have just opened fire on several military targets in Gaza belonging to Hamas. This comes only 24 hours after another explosion rocked the Strip that would be yesterday's attempted assassination of visiting Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Hamdallah. Today's explosion reportedly came from an improvised explosive device, or an IED, which can be tough to defend against, given their unpredictability. Several Israeli troops were seriously injured in an IED explosion in the Strip just last month. With tensions simmering, the army is likely gearing up for more. Despite speculation that Israel is advancing its plan to deport African asylum seekers, Israel's High Court has now ruled that the deportation plan just won't stand up to legal challenges. The state has decided to freeze all deportations, at least for now. And ILTV's Aaron Porras is here with more on this story. Now, Aaron, why won't the deportation stand in court, and what is the latest since this freeze has been announced?
So basically, the court says that this won't stand up to legal challenges because Israel cannot guarantee the safety of these asylum seekers after they've been deported to these third-party countries. And furthermore, Israel basically said that they're still planning on starting the deportations after reworking their plan both internally and with the international community, but they're planning on resuming deportations as soon as April 1st at a rate of about 600 per month.
Now, this is interesting because this comes just 2 days after the Holot detention center was closed, where many of these asylum seekers were held. And many saw this as a sign of an advancement of this, deportation plan. So what can asylum seekers expect right now?
So for now, there are a few things that we know. The first is that women and children asylum seekers are still not targeted for deportation. Second, the state will continue to hold deportation hearings, and anyone with an open case file is also safe for deportations, pending the conclusion of that case. Third, asylum seekers already in custody of the state are not going to be released, and those who refuse deportation will be subject to indefinite imprisonment in Saronim prison.
Now, you mentioned something about working with the international community. Obviously, the UN has been speaking to Israel about different plans. Canada has been speaking to Israel. How is all that going?
So, there are approximately 38,000 asylum seekers right now living in Israel. 72% of which are Eritrean and 20% are Sudanese. Both of these populations are considered refugees across the world. So right now the UNHRC is working with the international community to maybe absorb some of these asylum seekers, provided that Israel absorb the rest.
Right. And finally, in regards to what's happening here internally, how are Israelis responding to this? We saw a lot of protests against the deportation.
Yeah, it's very divisive. In general, most activists and outspoken people are blasting the deportations overall, especially actually from Holocaust survivors, which is very interesting. And what's even more interesting is that there's about 1,000 families who have signed up for a program to illegally house a lot of these asylum seekers.
Which we've covered several times.
Exactly, which we've covered several times, and that's,
well, this is good news for now. So obviously we're going to wait and see what happens.
And report it as it comes out.
All right. Thousands of students took part in a protest across the United States yesterday to push for stricter gun control laws and honor the 17 victims murdered in last month's horrific school shooting. Jewish day schools all over the U.S. joined the walkout and commemorated those lost in the February 14th Stone Douglas High School shooting. Conservative Reform and Orthodox Jewish schools took part in the record-breaking walkout that lasted 17 minutes, 1 minute for every victim lost in the Parkland High School shooting. The protest started at 10 a.m. with some students lighting candles and others reading Jewish prayers. One conservative school even held an entire morning of activities, recalling details about each of the victims that they themselves identified with. The walkout is a cry from students for gun reform in the United States in the wake of what some say is an epidemic of mass shooting. Ironically, Israeli weapons firms and defense leaders received practically a standing ovation in Mississippi that same day. The Israeli delegation was there to participate in the International Homeland Defense and Security Summit. American leaders proudly commended Israel's strong national security as the act to follow, and touted new arms deals with the Israeli military. In Israel, gun ownership is tightly restricted and school shootings are nearly unheard of, but no comparisons to American legislation were mentioned during the day's events. After drawing ire from his comments about women enlisting in the IDF, Rabbi Tzvi Kostner has just been dismissed from the reserves. Kostner also heads a pre-military religious academy and has been an active reservist for over 25 years. But his most recent rant, in which he accused the IDF of, quote, waging a cultural war and destroying families, seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back. Here to discuss Kostner's dismissal further is Rabbi Dov Halbertal, who is a former head of the Office of the Chief Rabbi of Israel and a former lecturer in Jewish law. All right, Rabbi, why is it a problem for women to take up more of a role in the Israeli army?
I think the place of a woman, a Jewish woman, is not in the army at all.
What is the place of a Jewish woman?
Not in the army. In the community, within the community, within...
Okay, why?
Why? Because I was in the army. Everybody that was in the army knows that it's the most materialistic, anti-spiritual place. And to come to hungry young boys seeing a girl there among them, that brings not very good things. Everybody knows. I mean, kind of modesty. They can be in the army. They can be pilots. They can be everything. That's not the question. The question if the army is the place of a Jewish girl, the answer is no.
So your concern is the effect that women being in the military would have on the men?
Of course. It's
right, but men and women walk by each other every day on the street in Tel Aviv, right?
No. There is a difference. Strolling in the street in Tel Aviv or being in the army is a big difference.
Why is that?
Because the army, is a place. It's a close place, with a lot of feeling and atmosphere of entertaining. That's not a place for a Jewish girl.
But what about schools?
Tel Aviv,
it's
no.
The same thing in
It's
schools?
not the same thing. It's not at all the same thing. And the army now wants
so what is
more
it?
and more
So let's talk about what the place is for a Jewish woman.
In this concern, I have a question for you. The army brings, for example, the women to sing songs. How can they enforce me as a soldier to hear them? How can you justify morally, legally, in a Jewish, in the Jewish morals, that the army imposes me to hear the women singing? How can you explain it?
But how can you justify not?
This is the
here's
task
my
of
question:
the army.
how can you justify not advocating for men to be more in control of themselves? Right? If the question
because
is that
it's the nature of you can.
So a man is just a man naturally can't control his sexuality.
He can control. I wouldn't say, but the temptation is when it's bigger. It's coming much difficult. It's the whole ethos of the Jewish tradition. You cannot rely upon yourself, myself, yourself, never. So you always, from childhood and in the synagogue, you are separate.
Well,
that's the reason. Don't rely upon yourself. And to bring in the army those you see in the film here, those girls, that's a place for a Jewish woman.
But again,
I call
you haven't
from
defined,
here not to come to the Jewish army.
You haven't defined what you believe a Jewish woman should be doing. You said in the community. What does that mean? I'm a woman who's working. I'm a woman who is a working woman. Yeah. Is a Jewish woman not supposed to be doing what I'm doing?
That's a very sensitive and very long question. In short,
why is it there's a yes or a no?
No, it's not yes or no. It's not.
How is it not a yes or no?
I will tell you. In general, in principle, the best is the woman to be at home and with her children.
And a man
The
should
best.
not be at home with
The
his
best.
children.
Now, the generation.
Okay, well.
No, you are
Yeah.
laughing, but that
No,
is in
I'm not
principle
laughing, I just
the
think
Jewish
that that-
tradition, and this is the case that brought us to here and kept us for thousands of years.
Well, we live in a
everywhere.
changing
And
world.
you-
It's 2018, my friend. Yes.
Every generation they say it changed the world, and the reforms change the world, and you know all the non-religious change the world, and they are assimilating 70% in the States. You know it, 70%. Why? Because they are not keeping those things. They are not
Well,
keeping the
Rabbi,
morals. They are not-
Rabbi Halbertown, unfortunately, I'm going to continue doing my job
Yeah,
here
yeah,
today,
that-
and I
that's-
don't think that's
that's
going
the
to change.
smallest problem, yeah.
But no, I mean, I do think it is important for us to remember it's not a matter of reform, conservative, or orthodox.
It is.
Women
It
are
is.
just as
It is.
capable as
Women,
men.
according
and
to
can
the
be
Jewish
doing-
tradition, cannot fulfill themselves everywhere and every time. Cannot.
And that is your opinion. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining us. All right, people across the world are still grieving the passing of genius astrophysicist Professor Stephen Hawking. The top scientist did have a somewhat complicated relationship with Israel as the years went on, but Israeli scientists are looking back on the time with Hawking fondly. They're even recalling how a debate between Hawking and an Israeli professor in the 70s led to one of his greatest contributions, a breakthrough theory on black holes. Hawking famously suffered from ALS, a degenerative disease that doctors predicted would kill him by the age of 23. The professor achieved a sort of celebrity status by not only outliving that deadline by decades, but by discovering the secrets of the universe along the way, all with his trademark style and self-denigrating humor.
Although my body is very limited, my mind is free to explore the universe, to go back to the beginning of time and into black holes. There are no limits to the human spirit.
Well, Hawking's famous debate in the 70s with Hebrew University professor Jacob Bekenstein, paved the way for their game-changing theory on black hole thermodynamics, known as Bekenstein-Hawking entropy. For the next several years, Hawking enjoyed a strong friendship with Israel, where scientific minds often gathered, and even honored Hawking at Israel's Academy of Sciences and the Humanities in 2006. Some years later, however, Hawking was persuaded by his friend and the cognitive scientist Noam Chomsky to join the BDS cultural boycott against the Jewish state. His Israeli peers say this turn, of course, disappointed them at the time, but that Hawking eventually gave up the BDS movement prior to his death. Regardless, Professor Hawking's death truly marks the end of an era in science. Still, though, it's impossible to know just how many have been inspired by his countless discoveries, theories, and jokes over the years. All right, when it comes to stories about Israel and the Palestinians, I'll be the first to point out that a lot of what we see on the news is unfortunately the bad stuff. And while there, of course, is still a lot of turmoil on both sides, something that isn't covered enough is the cooperation that does happen on the ground, despite years of frozen peace talks. In Jericho, for example, Jewish pilgrims have been conducting tours to the ruins of a Byzantine-era synagogue for many years now, and usually in peace, despite the fact that the site is, in fact, operated by Palestinian security forces and located deep in the West Bank. Obviously, this is a very meaningful visit for Jews to make, and one that Palestinians there think should be open to all, as long as it steers clear of politics.
هناك العديد من المواقع كأماكن عبادة، لكن هي بالأساس هي مواقع أثرية، ويجب أن لا يستغل الموقع الأثري من منطلق عبادة لاستخدامات أيديولوجية مختلفة.
These trips require an impressive amount of coordination between both sides. Well, since the site is located in the West Bank, the group must get permission for transportation from Israeli authorities. The convoy is then escorted by Israeli guards who bring them into the West Bank and then hand them off to Palestinian guards. For some visitors, the sight of Palestinian flags over a synagogue is a strange sight at first.
כשיש אפשרות להגיע למקומות האלו על ידי תיאום ודברים כאלה. אני באופן אישי מאוד אוהב לטייל במקומות האלה, אני יודע שיש עוד הרבה כאלה, וזה מאוד טוב שיש את האפשרות הזאת.
These visits, like several others in the West Bank, have gone off mostly without a hitch for quite some time now. This is despite the fact that Israeli and Palestinian leaders haven't officially talked since 2014. We may not see a whole lot of stories like this on the news these days, but trust us, it does happen, and it sets an important example that we can only hope politicians might soon try to follow. It's been a week since International Women's Day was marked by massive demonstrations across the globe, but the American March in New York has now been stained with accusations of anti-Semitism after organizers neglected to invite any Jewish representatives to speak and voice support for the known anti-Semite and Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan. Joining us now is Emily Schrader, the digital director at Stand With Us, to give us her insight on why this happened. All right, so you just wrote an op-ed for the Jerusalem Post claiming that feminism is being hijacked. Can you explain why you say that?
Right, so this has been an issue of mine for a while. I was upset, frankly, about how the Women's March sort of used the campaign and the important cause of feminism to achieve their own agendas years ago. However, now it's really come to light because of Tamika Mallory, one of the co-chairs, and her involvement or attendance in Louis Farrakhan's speech. However, she's not the only one. Carmen Perez, also another co-chair, she also defended him by stating that, there are no perfect leaders, which isn't really a justification. I mean, we're talking about someone, Farrakhan, who said that Hitler was a very good man, who said that the Jews are his worst enemy and Jews are responsible for 9/11. So there's been a consistent pattern of association with people who are explicitly anti-Semitic. And also there's been an ongoing trend over the last few years of refusing to condemn anti-Semitism and pushing the Palestinian cause as an issue of women's rights.
Well, why would the march intentionally exclude Jewish groups and speakers? What is the point of doing that?
I mean, I don't know. That's a question for them. I don't know why they would explicitly exclude them. What they actually did with the initial platform was they said that, they listed a whole litany of causes of groups who are underrepresented or discriminated against, but didn't mention Jews at all. So it wasn't as much saying that Jews aren't welcome. It was saying that that's not a cause or a group that's discriminated against, which unfortunately, as we know, just isn't the case.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, what can be done to correct this issue is, in your mind, what are the steps that need to be taken right now?
I mean, I think first and foremost, all of them need to universally condemn anti-Semitism and come out with a very strong statement. And what they've done isn't that. They've been pushed by other people because of everything that's happened to condemn it, and they've sort of tiptoed around it. Linda Sarsour and Carmen Perez and Tamika Mallory. Tamika Mallory's initial response was tweeting something that almost didn't make sense about how, if you're not persecuted by those who persecuted Jesus, then you're not doing the right thing, which of course is an anti-Semitic stereotype in and of itself. Right. So they need to universally condemn this. And I think that other women like myself, other Israeli women too, and Zionists who they've explicitly come out against in the past, need to speak out and say this is unacceptable. Feminism is too important of a cause to be hijacked by people who can't stand up to anti-Semitism.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Emily.
Thank you.
All right, the Israeli government has pumped nearly $500 million shekels towards bringing more Arab students to university. And the results have already shown to be a massive success. But with that success comes another important step in helping Arab students succeed in the classroom. Staff at Israeli universities are now undergoing sensitivity training aimed to bridge the cultural gap. This kind of training is critical in helping university staff understand and relate to Arab students from all walks of life. For example, Arab students tend to enter university at age 18, whereas Israeli students are typically 3 to even 10 years older because of the army. Culturally, children from Arab families are often taught not to address their elders by their first name, something that most Israelis abandon by the age of 2, and especially by the time they're addressing their college professors. Arab enrollment in higher-level scholastic students is rising at an impressive rate here in Israel, and the funding of these kind of cultural awareness lessons shows Israel is serious about integrating its Arab population into higher education and ultimately the workforce. But these are certainly some steep obstacles to overcome, considering many Arab students already say they feel like strangers in a strange land as soon as they step foot onto an Israeli campus. For some, this is their first prolonged time with Jewish Israelis, and on top of the language barrier, the added stress of succeeding in school is even more extreme for Arab students, most of whom come from poorer backgrounds. Bridging the gap isn't always easy, but the children are our future, so this plan is worth every penny. All right, Sony has just announced a finalist for its annual World Photography Awards. And get this, 2 Israeli photographers have just been named among the world's best. Check this out. Snagging a spot on the short list is Tel Aviv-based photographer Ariel Tagar. After working as a military photographer in the IDF, Tagar traveled the world honing his photo skills. His latest series, a collection of portraits of Vespa enthusiasts in Uganda, clinched him a spot as a finalist in this year's Sony World Photos Awards. Uganda's Vespa Club series has been published worldwide and garnered international acclaim already, and now it might very well win Tagar the gold. Sony also named Israeli photographer Dina Alfasi's entry, titled Epiphany, as one of the top 50 entries submitted in the competition's culture category. The incredible image captures an Orthodox Christian baptism held in Israel's Jordan Valley. This is actually her second year in a row cracking the top 50. Alfasi snapped last year's entry, titled Air, on her smartphone while riding the bus to her day job in Haifa. Just goes to show that no matter where you are or what kind of camera you're using, when it comes to art, all that matters is the moment, the emotion, and being ready for inspiration to strike.
All right, we know where you should travel if you want to get in a good mood. The UN has just released the findings of their annual World Happiness Report. And guess what? Out of 150 countries, Israel is the 11th happiest country in the world. Not too shabby, right?
The UN's report compiles all kinds of information to make its annual list: healthcare, integration of foreigners, etc. Israel scored 11th place on last year's list too. Improvements in Israelis' average life expectancy was pointed to as a major reason the Jewish state was able to retain its spot, topping Western countries like the US, France, and Germany. There was a little bit preventing Israel from cracking the top 10, though. The report calls out Israel's overall unwillingness to accept migrants or refugees, as well as poor emotional well-being of Israelis in general, as the biggest things holding the country back. I think Dr. King might have said it best. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that.
With Tel Aviv Fashion Week wrapping up, ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here to give us the top 5 Israeli models.
So when we're talking about classic Israeli supermodels, we're constantly reminded by the blonde bombshell that is Bar Rafaeli, or our very own superhero Gal Gadot, both timeless beauties. But why not share with you a few drop-dead gorgeous girls you may not have heard of? First on our list might sound a little predictable, but Esti Ginsburg. She may fall under the Rafaeli and Gadot list, being featured in 3 Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues. She's also modeled internationally for brands like Tommy Hilfiger, and Burberry is among the top 10 highest paid models in Israel. Number 2 on our list is Shlomit Malka. At only 24 years old, the young model has created quite a name for herself, appearing in major campaigns such as L'Oreal, Armani, Lancôme, Chanel, Ralph Lauren, and the list goes on. She's signed with countless international agencies and is only getting bigger from here. If you haven't yet, get ready to see her face everywhere. Third up is Nibal Madal, the young 21-year-old declared by several publications as the new Bar Rafaeli. She may be young, but this stunning girl has already walked the Paris Fashion Week runway, and who could forget, was featured on covers of Elle, Cosmopolitan, and Marie Claire. Natural top model is an understatement. Fourth on our list is another young model. This one is just 15 years old, Dorit Rivles. She's too young to drink, but she's made an undeniable mark in the fashion world already, having signed a contract with Yves Saint Laurent's luxury fashion house and is seen all across Topshop stores around the world. She's literally just getting started. Last up on our list, who you may already know, Noam Frost. This gorgeous girl started her international career a few years back and has since worked with A-list photographers and designers. She was even chosen for a fashion spread in the Italian edition of Vanity Fair. Some say Frost has a more unusual look, but to be honest, all I see is stunning. That's it for today's Top 5. Back to you.
And now it's time for our Hebrew word of the day. Well, we just counted down the Holy Land's top 5 models, so it's time to do up your hair, grab an outfit, and hit the runway, because today's word is ledagmen, which is how you say to strike a pose in Hebrew. From Milan to Tel Aviv, when Fashion Week rolls around, models of all shapes and sizes have to ledagmen, or pose, from morning till night. Some people say to ledagmen all day is too easy to be a real career, but let's be honest, we've all tried to ledagmen in private once or twice with that new outfit in front of the mirror. And come on, imagine doing it all day, in heels no less. And by the way, the Hebrew word for model is dugman, or for a guy, or dugmanit for a girl, which obviously comes from ledagmen. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy with a low of 56 or 13 degrees Celsius. Over the weekend, skies are expected to clear a bit and temperatures are supposed to rise slightly to a high of 69 or 21 degrees Celsius.
All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.43 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.